Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah. All right.
Peace. Jakil Allah.
Peace, Jarulullah.
And we'd like to welcome you to another show and broadcast of the Knowledge Yourself radio show on September the 8th, called the Build or Destroy Day. And let's begin by reminding you that our show is sponsored by Global Position Solution. You can hit them up at globalsolutions.net. What is your position? Also, you can get in contact with us through www.knowledgeyourselfradio.weebly.com. And today's show is titled Interracial Dating and Relationships. So like we normally do, we're going to begin with a quote from the autobiography of Malcolm X. And he said, "I'm right with the Southern white man who believes that you can't have so-called integration, at least not for long, without intermarriage increasing. And what good is this for anyone? Let's again face reality. In a world as color hostile as this, man or woman, black or white, what do they want with a mate of the other race?" So why don't we just swirl that around for a moment. I just want to begin by saying in terms of interracial relationships, I can tell you that at least one relationship between what would be considered an original person, black or brown, yellow, and a white person that has proven to fail consistently is the relationship between Caucasian teachers and those of original students. So what I mean by that is, if we say, like we did on a previous show, that 90% of the educators in the United States are Caucasian women, one of the things that we have to consider is that attests to the fact that it's extremely difficult for at least Caucasian women in education to develop not only natural relationships, but relationships that are built on the fact that I see you as my own child, so I'm going to teach you as such. And the failure that we see in the school system, we also have to consider how is that in society. So one of the things that's going to be posed on today's show is, as a society, and let's begin in America, as well as around the world, how are interracial relationships beneficial to not only society, the world, but to the people who are involved in them? So why don't we go ahead and take a chew off Brother Malcolm X's quote first.
That's a lot. Yeah, peace. I'll say, outside of people being in different spaces that you may not be in, so I guess that's strictly looking at like a networking point of view. I would say there's, at least from one point of view, I would think from original people to Caucasian people, you're not necessarily losing so much, because when you have a child with that Caucasian person, it's going to end up being an original child. Whereas if Caucasian going the other way, you end up losing yourself in that child. So I'd say from their perspective, it may not be a reason to commingle like that, just from the basis that you want to keep your so-called race, which we talked about in the other show. That was an idea generated. What was that in the 1800s or something like that?
Yeah.
Provocative.
Yeah, for me, it's really dealing with, the words relationship. So, when you deal with relationship, you got to deal with relatability or relate, being able to relate with one another. And that takes a lot of time, effort, and being able to humble yourself. So I don't think in a lot of cases, based on ego and other different factors, people are willing to really humble themselves that much to relate to another person, so there can never be a true equality between those two people. And it's usually one person kind of selling themselves short in a sense.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Sometimes people sound weird because I see someone who has the same car as me, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like, "Why are you saying what's up to that person? You know?" I'm like, "Nah, but we got something in common. We both bought the same car."
Right.
You know what I mean? And for me, it's like the God degree, the one, 1 to 14. Dealing with separation and why do they call our people African? But personally, I always try and find things that I have in common with people. versus what I have
Right.
out. You know what I'm saying? What I
Right.
don't have in common with them.
Right.
And hopefully that's enough to build a relationship with. Or if nothing else, I'll have an opportunity, maybe to an exchange something, right? Set up a
Right.
trading post.
Right, right, and I think it's key because we're not advocating that you should date or marry one particular person from whatever other ethnic from an ethnic group. We're not advocating you make the decisions that we've made, so to speak, because it's your life. However, we do want to bring up some of the, I should say, recurring societal consequences of dating someone who is Caucasian or marrying them. Unfortunately, there tends to be a brutal loss of identity, not only because you're being sucked into white society, at least to a certain degree, but at the same time, some people, when they're honest with themselves, they'll admit that there are times when they don't know which world to choose from. Mm-hmm. So then we go into the idea of what the black experience is. And those of you, if you're viewing right now and you happen to have a white companion and you happen to be of African descent, of Asian descent, right, or Mexican or Central American descent, you may want to ask your white companion, what is, for me, I would say, what is the black experience? And sit back and listen to it and see what their take is on it. Because from what Jarul and Jakil just said, a part of interracial relationships, it does have to begin with honesty. And many people blindly go into relationships with people, even with members of their own ethnic group, without really trying to be honest and truthful with that other person. Right. So we're off. We're going to tee off on a great show. We have our current events. As usual, this is one of those things we really enjoy sharing with you, some of the deeper meaning of what's going on in our world and in the news today. Let's let Jakil kick that off.
Yeah.
Peace, brother.
Peace. So I've got this current event here. We've got this man buying up property. His name is Paul Craig. Age 61, he's been buying up a lot of property in this small town in the Midwest. And, that's not so newsworthy outside of the fact that he's buying this property so that he can make it all-white town. And he's not going to let anyone in unless they are Aryan, strictly Aryan, and abide by the rules of that town. And no one else who is not Aryan of Aryan descent can get into that particular town. So this small town of 24 people, they don't necessarily have the means to defend themselves from this dude buying up land like that. They're trying to protest, but
wow.
if you saw the Save the Farm video, they tried to protest too. So
right.
Sometimes that doesn't always work out.
I would ask, what do you think is wrong with that, if anything? Because he's a person that has enough clout and money to do something like that. What is the harm in what he's doing?
Outside of furthering the wedge between black and white, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you understand, like from a scientific level, Caucasian people, and you understand their foundation as far as trying to preserve themselves on the planet, things like this don't really shock you anymore. You know what I mean? Because you see, they almost have to isolate themselves in some fashion so that they can still remain on the planet. You know what I mean? So, I don't have a problem with it.
Indeed, check out that History of Caucasian show. We do give you a lot of valuable information.
I mean, I guess other than that, though, that does kind of, if you allow that kind of mind frame to exist, right, a separation mind frame, eventually that has to branch out, right, because it's not going to survive being local like that. Like you said, we talked about in another show. And so you have the coast invading into different places because, that mind state of domination and Manifest Destiny,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, okay, if we brought up North Dakota, right? Why can't we have South Dakota? And damn, now that we got South Dakota, you know what I mean? Why don't we take this too? All of this is really ours. I mean, we are the dominant white race on the planet,
Mm.
and I just think it sets the sets the stage for a lot of bad things if you allow something like that to exist.
Interesting piece right there.
That's true too.
Well, thank you very much for that, Jakil. Let's move on to the second current event. I'm sure some of you heard just recently in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that a young girl by the name of Tiana Parker, who was a student at a charter school known as Deborah Brown Community School in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was sent home because of her sporting dreadlocks. And I wanted to quote what was said to the news station KOKI TV. It says that the school felt that Tiana's hairstyle could, quote, distract from the respectful and serious atmosphere it strives for. If you look at some of the news reports, one of which I watched on, I believe it was MSNBC, they were interviewing Tiana's father, and he said that they didn't have a problem with her dreadlocks last year. So that means that she attended the school last year with their hair.
So now what's the issue?
Well, I mean, now they're enforcing a policy that was, I guess, overlooked last year. And sometimes what happens with charter schools, they want to hold on to all the students that they have because that's going to determine whether or not they can continue to operate. So to a certain degree, when you look at it from a teaching perspective,
you want that
she was used last year to fill up a seat, and now since they have
more people there,
students, now we can enforce this policy.
Right.
And it's really sad seeing the young girl on the news, and she was crying, and they asked her, like, why are you crying? And she said, because, they don't want me to go to school because of my hair. And for those of you out there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who are running the Deborah Brown Community School, anytime you see a young black male or female with dreadlocks, in order for them to remove the dreadlocks, in most cases, they have to shave their hair off. Yeah. So a part of that is just, you're trying to have someone remove their identity. But the interesting thing is her father, her father's name is Terrence Parker. He's a barber, of all things.
Okay.
And he just said that, he takes great pride in sending his daughter to school, and she's always presentable, and, he's pretty shocked. So he pretty much took her out of the school and sent her to a different school.
Wow, good.
Wow. So in the home of where Black Wall Street was. That's deep.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah, way to bring that connection up.
Right. So moving on. Okay.
True indeed.
Yeah, so my current event is actually from a website called Freewood Post, and the headline is NRA President Jim Porter, quotations, it's only a matter of time before we own colored people again, end quotations. So the NRA, for those who don't know, is the National Rifle Association, and I'm gonna read a couple more quotes by him.
Wait, can I get that first quote again?
Rewind it, bring it back, come rewind. Okay. All right, so it says NRA President Jim Porter, quotations, it's only a matter of time before we own colored people again.
Wow.
End quotations, yes.
Wow.
Yes, so this is the head of the National Rifle Association.
That's deep.
So another quote is, I'm very proud to be taking the lead here at the NRA. We need to really buckle down and strap on our best arguments to defend what is our God-given rights. No more northern folk trying to take away what is rightfully ours. I will not stand by and let some liberal elitists try to ruin what has made this country great, especially liberal of, a different breed.
Wow.
That's not even the bad part. That's just a tip. Okay, so another part of the quote is, I don't have to clarify, God darn well what I mean. In fact, it's only a matter of time before we can own colored people again. They sure as hell won't be our leaders. It's It's outright embarrassing. The war of northern aggression made it all possible, and you be best to know it's all gonna change back. It's that southern dialect, man. It's got me.
You be best to know. Okay.
It's gonna change back. I'll be on the front lines making sure it happens. I don't want my grandkids growing up taking orders from a colored man. It's only our God-given right to keep them as property and keep them in line.
Wow. Wow, we have a tremendous amount of building to do.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get him on the show to speak a little bit. I'm sure he would be interested in
to
what
clarify some of those things.
Oh, indeed, we can clarify things. I mean, again, I think it's just what was said earlier. We're not really shocked by too many things that's being said, especially from groups of people who, unfortunately, they're experiencing what we know as an inferiority complex. Because as far as our lessons are concerned, him saying that, it's only a matter of time before we own colored people again, it means that you're striving to own your own people again because you've never owned original people, simply because of the fact, as we've stated in the show, that your generation or your genetic breed came thousands of years after we first walked the earth. And it has always been original people that has taught some sense of civilization. But we can see civilization doesn't necessarily trickle down like water in the desert. So in saying that, I guess the one thing, as far as finding commonality, one thing we can say is that some original people do advocate owning firearms and preserving the right to bear firearms.
For sure.
That's probably one of the only things we agree with in terms of some of the people in the NRA.
Right.
But that's really an entertaining piece right there. So what I wanted to do is just go ahead and step into the questions of today's show. Or did you have one more, God?
Yeah, actually.
All right. Shoot ahead. Yeah,
I do have one more. So recently at the let me pull that up right here, at the G20 meeting, which I won't go into all the specifics of what the G20 and G8 meetings are. You guys can look that up.
It used to be the G7.
Right?
It's G20 now?
G20
so 13
now.
more nations in that. Okay, go ahead, brother.
So, basically, the president of Russia led a campaign speaking out to America and Obama, or let me not say America, because we've only got 9% of Americans who are really about it like that. So, the rest of them with intelligence don't want war, but so you've got the president of Russia saying to Obama and those other 9% of the blind, deaf, and dumb, dude, let's not go to war. Don't do this. It's a bad idea. And Obama doesn't bat an eye in his no response. And he's pretty much keeping it pushing with going to war in Syria. And with everything that means, going to war with Syria. And this is on the backs of, like I said earlier, John Kerry, on the previous show, John Kerry and Obama both saying to Congress and the world basically, like, yo, we don't need your permission to go to war. If we want to go to war, we'll go to war, and we'll come back and tell you about it.
John Kerry? You mean the one that was an anti-Vietnam protester back in the day?
That dude.
Okay.
Did you see what he looked like on the thing? The guy looks like a corpse almost. Like he's dying.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It was. He kept leaning over on the table. Like, yeah, it was interesting. His wife didn't look too much better. I'm not trying to talk about people. I'm just saying, like, the dude looked bad.
It's crazy that all this stuff's happening, and I was thinking about this earlier. Think about all that's going on as far as distractions and entertainment right now. You got a show called Breaking Bad that's on. People are entrenched in that show. You got Sons of Anarchy getting ready to start next week. Another show called
is it Homeland coming up back
I
soon?
think Homeland, Boardwalk Empire. Football just started today.
Right. The son's probably watching the Chargers game.
Right. So it's like it's kind of ironic as far as the timing goes. All these different things going on to keep people distracted. Why it's getting ready to heat up as far as that situation goes.
Right. You know, it's interesting also if we go into more abstract thinking like we tend to do. I have a few comic books that they released, 20 something odd years ago called Secret Wars through Marvel.
Mm.
And, it always reminds me when you say that, the cover up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To distract people from what they really intend on doing, whether it's poisoning the well or starting a war, we're always going to be the last ones to find out about it.
Right.
Well, not us, right? Because, this is the Knowledge Yourself radio show, but in between the highlights and halftime, Monday Night Football, whatever you're watching, Sunday, keep an eye on the news. Look for the contradictions and see where things are going.
I actually posted in the Facebook group pictures of your man John Kerry having dinner with the Syrian president. Yeah, just briefly before Civil War broke out. Now, mind you, we've been in war, a secret war with these people for like 2 years and the better part of a half. And so now we're just trying to make it public and legalize it so we can, when I say we, I don't mean we,
right.
They, right? But so that they can go ahead and make it public and make it a funded war and get kind of more cracking.
I would definitely tell viewers to watch a film. It's called Why We Fight. That's a really interesting documentary, which kind of gives you a brief history of the United States and why they fought wars, at least since Eisenhower's time.
Cool.
And it's a very interesting and provocative video to watch. I encourage you all to watch that. Why We Fight. Thank you for that, brother. That's always enlightening to hear the news reports. Shall we get into the questions?
Yes, sir.
All right. Peace. So, question number one is there a aside from that,
That's a good one.
we should have some really interesting discussions here. Why don't we begin with the first portion of our show, where we want to explore the idea of the history of interracial relationships in the wilderness of North America. So, why don't we begin with the most basic question, which is, why has there been a divide between the races in America for, hundreds of years? So, why don't we just kind of pass that around? I wanted to let Jerul dig into that and give us a really good springboard into our discussion.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that, you've had different groups of people that have interacted in the Americas prior to any Caucasian people coming to the Americas. So that being said, there wasn't always a disconnect between so-called races or ethnicities. I think it didn't really start to change until Caucasian people came more from a stance of like, trying to dominate a people or take over their land or, get over on people. So I think there's been a divisive implement that they've used since they came into practice so that they could, maintain or develop a sense of control over people. So what they did was they would highlight the differences in original people, and based on those differences, like the God said, that God agreed in 1:14, why does the devil call our people Africans? Really dealing with keeping us separate, so we can't come together as a collective and take the minority off, off the planet or off of that piece of land.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like the precursor to what we deal with in this day and time, because those so-called differences still are seen by us as people,
Mm-hmm.
and it's bananas.
Even in the standard of beauty, right, or so-called beauty, right? When you look at models and you look at the features of original women, you don't necessarily see those same features in models. So initially, what they're saying in those pictures, right? Because they say pictures with 1,000 words. So, you can say a lot with just showing up a picture of what is believed to be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that definitely doesn't encourage, fuller lips, more defined hips.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah,
Right. And I think one of the things that I wanted to draw on in terms of what Jeru had said in terms of the earliest interracial relationships upon the Europeans' arrival. You have stories like La Malinche, which is supposedly this old story in Mexico, where they're basically accusing a particular woman who they termed as being like, a traitor,
okay.
who wound up becoming one of the explorers' companion by the name of Cortez. However, there are some other relationships that, have been recorded in history where maybe the two parties, the European as well as the original woman, willingly came into this union. Of course, history has been, diluted, mixed, and tampered with, burned, destroyed, retold, and rewritten down. So I kind of take certain stories with a grain of salt. But for the most part, all of the other interracial relationships that are recorded in history when Europeans came or went to our countries were forced.
Mm-hmm.
They were forced through rape, murder, pillage. Women that were taken in as wives also wound up being servants to these particular invaders. So I think that pretty much set the tone for what would be considered interracial relationships, at least in the Americas. I remember having a conversation with someone many years ago. A friend of mine at the time, he was Cambodian. And, well, he still is a Cambodian, but, as far as I know.
He was then, but no longer. Science has really come very...
excuse my my grammar there, y'all. But he was talking to a young lady who happened to be Cambodian, and she was very outspoken in terms of, I like white men, and, I like those white boys. And I think the way it was stated to us, it was as if she was trying to say that offensively, as if we were offended.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, I asked my friend, I said, why does it seem like, or at least it appears that there are so many Asian women that date white men, generally older white men? And he said that a lot of that comes from the occupation of white soldiers in those particular areas. And then he went into this whole dialogue about how some of the young ladies in his culture, again, Cambodian, they're groomed at a very young age to believe that white is associated with power. And anything other than white is associated with poverty, misery, and everything else that, is associated with not being the winning species of human.
Right. Right. I mean, that goes back to having a white Jesus.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's something that's relevant in our society. From cartoons, which me and Jack Hill built about, which I think at some point we gotta revisit that topic.
Yeah.
But a lot of cartoons that I definitely grew up on. I was really into Looney Tunes and stuff like that. You always had certain imagery that even as a young child, I looked at it was kind of suspect. To me, as far as anytime somebody would get like blown up, right? Their face would get blown up for whatever reason. They would have like a black soot covering their face, and their lips would be pink. And, so that already is starting to stick a pin in your head. to make you think like, okay, looking that way is a negative thing.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And then
you want to be the guy on the other side shooting the gun, making them look like the sucker.
Right. And anytime there was something dealing with, say, heaven, you had like people in all white floating, you know, kind of like. So it was the imagery.
No, that's deep, because then I was thinking, I've seen cartoons where they go to so-called hell, right? And everyone's kind of jumping around like booga booga, like they do in the jungle, supposedly, right? Every time you go in the jungle, they've got to be dancing like so-called African people do. Savage,
Right. So I think that's key what you said. So considering these stereotypes and the actual reality that has been created in white society, and what will be considered a white dominated world, how is it that blacks and whites were forbidden to be with one another in the United States? So why don't we just go ahead and dialogue about that? What were some of the ways that this was created in the Americas?
I think Drew actually has the best answer to that, so I'm gonna go ahead and let him answer. But I'm gonna set the stage for it. So basically, if I'm correct, right, we're talking like after slavery, where blacks and whites generally were working side by side with each other, and then you had the upper, richer class people basically trying to figure out how to separate and create a divide amongst those people. And now you have pardon me, that's before slavery, huh?
Oh no, that was something that occurred afterwards. You know, even prior to that, you know, instance, you look at, for example, it was forbidden for certain Caucasian people to have relations, you know, with so-called slaves or black people in America. It was, you know, looked upon as savagery in a sense, but at the same time, we know and understand that they were sneaking. You know, sneaking.
Right.
You know, when the lights went out, they'd sneak out the house and you go to the back house and get it in. So it's always happened, but I think they just didn't want it to become something that was the norm because, like we spoke on the Caucasian show, your genetic lineage is weaker. Therefore, if you procreate with people of original, descent,
you can't hide that.
Right, you can't hide that. So that child's going to be born original, and then eventually you're going to wipe yourself out. So they had to institute some laws, statutes, and things like that to keep that separation. You know what I mean? So, and speaking on his point as it relates to after slavery, yeah, there was your poor Caucasian people basically living right beside the original people who were so-called freed from slavery, and they were actually getting along. And even in some instances, you had relations happening. So, just like we spoke about when they came here and they divided people, they made sure that there was a divide between those people too. So, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think just to interject even more to what was said, because these are really good points that my brothers made. They also, form these different laws, and just to give you a really good audio reference, for, based on what Jeru said in terms of when it becomes noticeable that one of two parents is an original person, right? Can't hide it, but there's a good song. It's an old song though by Public Enemy. It's called "Can't Trust It." So I would encourage you to watch the video because that's even heavier. You know what I mean? That whole thing.
Right.
So again, Jeru was speaking on the fact that there has always been a history of inheritance in Caucasian families because again, they used our people to make themselves wealthy, and this has been recorded in history all around the world. Okay, so people can dispute that fact, but the reality is, when we look at the state of Caucasian families today, and if they were to honestly trace their lineage back about 200 or 300 years, they would see why their parents today are in a somewhat better position than, say, another family who happens to be, of African descent. Just being one example. Okay, so in saying that, much of what we saw especially right after slavery, is that many families were trying to preserve their inheritance. They didn't want their wealth to wind up in the hands of families or people that was not, quote unquote, pure blood, so to speak. Some of the laws they had, just looking in the Constitution, how we weren't even considered full human beings. So when you have things written like that in a nation's laws, of course, that's going to permeate down to its citizens,
Right.
of course. Um, in addition to that, I think many of the legislation that came later, which reinforced segregation and segregationist practices, was really meant to give Caucasians the opportunity to build their institutions. Getting the demotion in the society that we live in for stepping over that line to where, hey, you know what? We don't care who you date, but we really don't endorse you dating a black guy. You know what I mean? Those types of conversations that take place in white households.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I mean, right.
I've got a story about that. I won't say any names to protect the other party, but in junior high school, I dated this white lady girl. Are you still girls in junior high school?
Still girls.
I don't want to offend anyone. You know what I mean? What do you call her a girl? And anyway, we were walking. I was walking her home, and this white truck drives by, and dude gives me the whole Hitler hand out the window, and it's like, you effing nigger,
Wow.
something, stop, leave our women alone.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, okay, so like it's gonna go down, and I'll save you all the drama, but yeah, that's just one event of. And she ended up telling me, she was like, yeah, we kind of have to keep it a secret because my dad is kind of racist, and that was my brother and his friend, and they're obviously racist. Yeah, so I was like, well, it's probably better that we just don't date.
Yeah.
Right.
For my own safety.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's not you, it's me.
Because, because I know for a fact that Jeru shared he shared a news report some time ago where at least I don't remember exactly how many black males. It was at least one that happened to be led to a house by a Caucasian woman. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Two, and they were mutilated. As a result of that. So I mean, there are a lot of instances where white women have been used as pawns to lure in black men so that black men could be murdered. Whatever the intention of the young lady was, she still wound up being a pawn for that. Right. So yes, that is always a safety issue and a concern.
Sure.
I would really like us to roll over into, since we gave a brief consideration of the history. I mean, we could go on and on about that, but I do want us to consider, why are interracial relationships between non-white people considered taboo among some people? So I wanted to give this over to Jeru so he can kind of break down why we don't consider a relationship between someone who's classified as African American or of African descent, who has a relationship with someone who's considered of Mexican descent. Why we don't consider that an interracial relationship? I want to let you take that away, man.
All right. Well, simply, the way I look at it is that original people, whether it be black, brown, or yellow, are people who share common history. Now, we all can say, yeah, Caucasian people do share the same history as us, but at a certain point, there was obviously a mutation that caused people to become Caucasian. So I don't necessarily see that connection to some of our history as similar. Like you can look at whether it be here in America, you know, you can go to Asia, what is known as Asia, Africa, and you can see how there's certain people who left and migrated out into different areas and regions, and there's an actual connection between these people and these groups. Um,
I see what you're saying. And then you kind of laid it down in history. You got some people come out, and you got a big WTF. Like,
right, right,
Where'd you guys come from?
right. They came and they were obviously 100% different in the sense of not only physically, but just the way that they interacted with people. You know, it wasn't like an even exchange. It wasn't a peaceful exchange. It was, I want what you got. You know, get down and lay down.
Right.
So, you know, there's really no people who you can see on the planet who have carried or conducted themselves in a certain fashion, you know, like white people have or Caucasian people have. So, you know, that's not me trying to be disrespectful. You know, that's an actual fact. So,
and you know, I wanted to piggyback on that because one of the things I'll tell people is that, you know, if you happen to be a Salvadorian or from El Salvador, and and I say to you, you know, you're black. I mean, I just don't walk around saying this to people, but let's just say I say that you're black, and you say, no, I'm not black. So then you have to make a decision at this point. So if you're not black, then you must be white, because those are the extreme ends of the color spectrum. Okay, and some people want to say, I'm brown, I'm brown, I'm brown. Okay, going back to what the God said and what you know, Jaquil has added on about in previous shows, we're talking about your genetic makeup, which is what makes us, you know, have something in common through our DNA, genetics, and things of that nature. One of the things I wanted to share before I give it over to Jaquil, in terms of how he sees it, I read this interesting poll that came out last year through ebony.com, and you know, Ebony's you know, one of your classic black magazines.
Right.
And they took a poll and they asked a couple of questions, actually 2 questions. They asked people they polled, would you date outside your race? And is there still a stigma behind interracial dating? So 36% responded to, would you date outside your race? They said, no, people don't care anymore. Whereas 13% said, no, I want a strong black brother or sister. That was the question, the answer to the first question. So 13% said that, you know, no, they wouldn't want to do that. And then 87% answered, is there still a stigma behind interracial dating? Yes, true love is colorblind. About 87% said that in this poll. Wow. And that's an astonishing number. And, you know, however, you had like 64%, I guess, of another group of people in this poll. They said, yes, it still makes people uncomfortable. So they didn't really necessarily give us an idea about where did you get those percentages.
Right.
But I think I don't know how many people
statistics, man. One of those weird sciences.
Right. And then they have, would you ever date outside of your race? And again, 20% said no, I want a strong black brother or sister. And then another 80% said yes, true love is colorblind. So it seemed like they did it over a period of time.
Right.
But for the most part, for the most part, I think most people feel that love is color. Excuse me. Love is colorblind. You know, so I wanted to pass that over to Jaquil in terms of why is it that when we link up with someone who, quote unquote, in our case, is not a woman of African descent, why do we not consider that an interracial relationship?
I would say, kind of adding on to what Jeru was saying, we're generally the same people. You know what I mean? And even beyond DNA, if you just look at how, for instance, I'm with the Browns here, the so-called Mexican. She's actually Mexican and Salvadorian, but And then even if you look at how our families get down, right? We're generally the same people. We eat the same kind of foods. We prepare it slightly different, right? Mexicans use bean, cheese, and tortillas. Black people use bean, rice, and bread, right? But use same kind of thing. We just flavor it up different. It's where you're at, right? But
pork kills both of us.
Yeah. We both eat pork. That's what I was telling my girl. I was like, yo, we're the same people. We both do the same thing. We both have a lot of babies.
Right.
Like, we're the same people, right? There's no really difference, and that's looking just at how we get down, right? So you can see a kind of connection. Whereas with most white people, you don't see that, right? In original people's house, black and brown, yellow, they turn 18 and they turned 18. Happy birthday, right? A White House, you turn 18. Cool, man. I get the hell out of here. I've been waiting to get out of this house, man. I hate you, mom. I hate your dad too. I'm out. Right? And the parents are ready to kick them out too. Like, yo, I can't wait till you turn 18. Get the hell out of here.
Right.
Craziness. Yeah. So our family structures are the same. You know.
Yeah. I think one great thing to look at is that, for example, between black and brown, so-called black and brown people, you know, if we were all subjugated to, you know, the stripping of our natural way of life by the same people,
that's
then
a common bond
right,
that you share right there.
Exactly. The difference is that, you know, you have the English, or those who spoke English, who took us and put us in bondage, whereas people who spoke Spanish, you know, put brown people in bondage. So the language is different. So that I think that's what keeps us divided.
It's part of what keeps it right.
Yeah, one of the things that keep us divided. You know.
Right, and I would encourage all of us, and I'm saying this to myself, to step up your lessons in Spanish. And to you brothers out there, I'm going to tell you right now, if you learn how to speak Spanish, you're going to be able to speak to women from several different countries on this planet. Right?
And learn how the basics of salsa, man. And
you're going to find you a black woman. Ladies, too. I also wanted to share, it was an interesting excerpt from a journal called Journal of Marriage and Family, Volume 73, Issue 5. And this came out on October 2011. Pages 1065 through 1084. Some interesting statistics about marriage between different races, so to speak. Okay. And it was the data was taken from the 1980 census. I know how Jerul feels about the census, but it was taken from the 1980 census and the 2008 American Community Survey. And these are the things that they broke down in this journal. It says that intermarriage with whites increased rapidly among blacks since 1980, but stalled among Asians and American Indians. And then it says that, wow, the American Indians thing, that shouldn't be a shock. But anyway, you know.
I wonder what caused that.
Wow, what might that be? Okay, so black-white intermarriage increased threefold over 1980 to 2008, independent of changing socioeconomic status. So that's just like saying it wasn't a money-motivated union. That's basically what the journal's saying. It's also suggesting declining social distance between blacks and whites. I find that interesting. And then it says marriages between the United States and foreign-born populations also grew rapidly. So marriages to immigrants increased fivefold among United States-born Asian women and doubled among U.S.-born Latinas since 1980. And this is the last one that I really thought was interesting. It says outmarriage to whites also was higher among self-identified biracial than monoracial individuals, but these differences were smallest among blacks.
Right.
So,
and that's kind of what I always point to as far as interracial is that child will generally tend to lean more towards the white side. And I mean, it only, especially when they don't have knowledge of themselves, right? Because then it only makes sense because you see that you get a certain kind of privilege that you don't get when you say, yo, I'm original, I'm black. People are going to look at you a certain way. Even when they see those dominant features in you, they look at you a certain way.
And that was another thing I was thinking about in terms of just, you know, being around your family. The last gathering we went to, one thing I notice is that when our people get together, one's from El Salvador, Mexico, one's from Chicago. I don't know. That when the children come of age, it's more a gender. It's more of a gender thing than a well, my father's black. I want to be more like him. I want to be a black man.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or my mom is Mexican. I think I'm Mexican. I want to be more like my mom. I think with our people, it's more of a gender thing. It's like this is my example of manhood. This is my example of womanhood.
Right.
And if the child's mother happens to be black, quote unquote, right, of African descent, it's not that they're choosing a side. It's more or less where they feel their needs can be fulfilled for that lesson and how to be a better man or better woman.
Right. Sure.
It's true.
That's how I see it.
That's true.
So I wanted to go ahead and let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back at you on the Knowledge Yourself radio show. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Interracial.
Peace. Dr. Allah.
Peace to rule.
And before we left, we were having a heavy discussion about interracial relationships, what that means between original people and Caucasians, but also how it is an error to deem relationships between original people, whether they be between an Asian, quote unquote, person of African descent, or Mexican descent, so forth and so on, whereas we don't consider those relevant in terms of our culture and our people.
Right.
So,
I want to say one thing. One question to ask yourself, and I ask a lot of my clients because I have clients from different, walks of life or ethnicities. I have an Asian client. I asked her, or I told her, I was like, "You're black." She's like, "No, I'm not." So then I kind of set her up, and I was like, "Okay, so you say you're not black. What is black?" She has no answer.
Mm-hmm.
So you could see that there's still a negative connotation connected with black.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. No doubt.
So
I was going to say that, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with some of the stigmas that are related to interracial dating.
Mm-hmm.
Funny story is there was this Korean girl back in the day I tried to date. And I made friends with a bunch of Korean people that I would have probably otherwise not have necessarily talked to. All in attempts to hook up with this Korean girl, and it didn't work out. And so that's what you were saying, that stigma. There's still, in those stats where you reading today, was talking about Asians dating outside of their race. They really are kind of a close knit type group, unless you said like you're colonized. So I used to always make the joke. I'm like, man, I could never date that girl because I'm not in the army. Right? And you know, my skin complexion is a little too dark.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was my disadvantages. But as far as like stigmas, yeah, I think for whatever reason, there's still that kind of having a black man is like a good thing to have on the side, but that's not what you want to have your public facing thing be. Right? It's kind of like if you own a Ferrari, that's not what you drive in the daytime, right? You don't want it to fade in the sun. You want something to hit you, right? So you drive the other car. That.
So you're saying that the black man is like
man, you know, I was
the
trying
black
to
man is like a moped.
I was trying to say
it's fun to drive and no one's watching.
I was trying to say the black man was more like the Ferrari, right? Where you don't take that out. That's your front car that you used to get loose with, right? And you know, you have your Volvo or whatever,
right?
you know that you take around in the daytime, put your family in.
Good on gas.
And I think that's a really interesting analogy being made there, because you know when you're talking about social stigmas, you're talking about things that people have been taught living in the United States of America. So we go back to what we said in the first segment, which was, you know, where did all of these taboos and these stigmas come from in terms of dating a black man or dating a white woman, if you happen to be white as well. But the point is, there are some very deeply rooted stereotypes in regards to black women and black men. And you know, it's certainly not going to go away just because we have a quote-unquote biracial president. It would be interesting to take a poll of people to see how their concept or how their view of black men has changed since President Obama was elected in office.
It's probably going to mess it up for us now. They're like, look, he lied and contours like all black men do. See, Obama, you messed it up, man. Come on.
So I mean, in saying that, I think part of the stigma is that we generally are associated with the lower rung of society. You know, we're the ones, I'm specifically speaking from a black male perspective, because I can't speak from a black woman's perspective, I can only guess. But we're generally the ones associated with crime, poverty, helplessness, ignorance, and everything else that's associated with being the lowest of the low in society. You know, and that's actually been my experience, even though, you know, like my brothers and other people, you know, other people just like you watching out there, even though you have gained a lot of success in this society, there's just something in the back of your mind that says to yourself, like, you know what, why is it that I'm not a little bit farther ahead in my own economic development? You know, it's not that I haven't been trying. There's something a little bit deeper that we're not aware of. So then, since other people in this society kind of buy into these stereotypes, it prevents us from really shining as, you know, some of the greatest human beings, which our history shows that we are and have always been. Because quite honestly, I mean, you can just pick an industry. Let's say the sports industry. All right. Let's just say tomorrow you found out that black men were no longer going to play professional sports, and white women or black women either. Would you still be interested in watching professional football?
You have hockey,
and basketball.
But there would be a dude missing from the Kings, and there's a couple other black people floating around there who may be missing.
Right, but how many people tune into that hockey game? You know?
Right. So I mean, in saying that, and some of you may say, "Oh, it doesn't really matter. I would still watch basketball." What if they couldn't slam dunk anymore?
I would do from the Clippers.
Yeah, okay. You know, hey, here's what I want someone to do out there. I want you all to tell me the first Caucasian who slam dunked in professional basketball. Hit us up and put that on. Put that on our email. Yeah, put that on our Facebook, man. Do some research. Who's the first Caucasian man to slam dunk? All right. But my point is that we've added so many great things to all of the institutions that are here today.
Yeah.
So the fact that there are social stigmas still existing in terms of who we are as men and women, it's really complex.
I mean, I think big part of it, we kind of hinted at it, is the whole racism part of the slavery thing, and that's not that long ago. The show I've told the story. I think I have. My mother played basketball in Arkansas in high school, and so there was point in times where she was either blatantly told that she couldn't go play in that game, or they just left her out because she couldn't go play in that white part of wherever they were going to play at. And that's my mother, right? So, and then so you can imagine my grandmother, what she went through. And so that's not that long ago that we're talking about dealing with slavery and the mind state of black and white people throughout slavery and how they look at each other.
Yeah, and I think if you look at prior to any slavery, prior to any Caucasian people being on the planet, we ran the planet. Original men and women ran the planet. Therefore, when you come and you're the newest person on the planet, quite naturally you want to keep original people as far removed from that position as you can, so that you can have some sense of power and control.
And they worked extremely hard and continue to work extremely hard to cover up our greatness throughout history.
Oh yeah,
continue daily.
And yes, and what's funny is that some of us, we don't feel the need to work even harder to recapture our legacy on this planet. We pretty much are emulating Caucasians in terms of the fact that we're not interested in educating ourselves.
Right.
Even if it's not in an institution, you're still responsible for educating yourself. So I do want to kind of move it forward in terms of, what are some of the benefits of interracial relationships in terms of how people see them once they get into them? And what are some of the impediments? In other words, what are some of the setbacks to being in an interracial relationship? So there are several reasons why people date outside of their race. And I did read a list through Forbes.
Okay, Forbes, huh?
Right. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight, because I don't want to spend too much time quoting, too many sources, but one of the things that it said was that some of it is out of, I got to throw this in there because you said it. Escapism was one of them, and the other one was out of curiosity. And then it gives some reasons as to why or what escapism means and what curiosity means. So I wanted to kind of ask Jarul, what is escapism in terms of why, let's say, a black woman will date a Caucasian man before she'll even consider dating a black man?
Well, escapism really to me is of you trying to escape the stigma of your people. So you leave your community and you making it out into a different way of life or a different society that is deemed greater or higher. That would be escapism, because you're ignoring the essence of where you came from to try to be on a different level that you would deem as higher. But not realizing, not realizing that you're actually selling yourself. You're selling your soul in essence.
Right, no doubt. And I would say, in doing that, when you move to that other place, like you said, the general idea is not to go back and revisit that. And so oftentimes you lose all the history that was attached to that, right? Like we talked about in another show, when you lose the history of yourself, man, you end up living a savage way of life.
Right. And, I think that's another thing, in terms of the history of yourself. I don't really know, and there's a ton of research that we can do just from all of our shows. But it would be interesting to see how many Caucasians actually teach their child the history of their companion. Do they really pump up and say, you know what, people of African descent or people of Mexican descent, people of Asian descent had some of the greatest civilizations known around the planet.
And not only that, do they teach the actual truth in regards to their own history? Interesting. Because that's the thing. I think that's one of the bigger issues when you have a a child that was born from a black, parent and a white parent is that if you really teaching that child the truth, it's going to be conflicting, because now they're going to see that, their white history is generally from, you know, attacking a certain group of people on the planet, taking their resources, you know, raping and pillaging their civilizations. And then on the other end, you're the one who are getting attacked, but you do come from greatness, this and that. So it's like
Story of Christmas.
Right.
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 Go ahead and break that down. What do you mean?
By the story of Christmas, I mean the symbolic way we dress up the tree. And so there was a man, his name escapes me now. I'll put it up. In any event, he would go out and take everyone else's jewels and
Nimrod?
There you go.
Nimrod?
Nimrod. And he would take everyone else's jewels and treasures and whatnot and bring them back and decorate his own place with it. And so that's why I said the story of Christmas, because you know how you get
right.
you decorate your tree, you put jewels on it. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting point. Another thing that came up when we were doing the research for the show, we were curious to know if financial and social status was one of the reasons as to why people were dating, white women and or white men if they were quote unquote original people. And the main question we asked was, are people in interracial relationships better off than those who are not? So I wanted to hit you all with another statistic. It's similar to what I read from the journal earlier. However, it says here 1 in 10 American marriages is now interracial, an all-time high. So there are about 293 million people in the United States. So
when they say interracial, are they meaning white or they mean interracial?
And see, this goes back to Jerul's beef with the census.
Right.
You know what I mean? It depends on what box people are checking. Right? So I really don't know. It says that is up 28% since 2000, according to census figures. There we go again. And translates to 5.4 million couples nationwide. That number looks primed to spike even higher, given that 18% of unmarried opposite-sex couples identify as interracial. So the question is, are people better off dating someone outside of their race? I mean, black people, when they decide to marry a Caucasian man or marry a Caucasian woman, are they better off financially? I mean, in terms of what we looked at.
Immortal Technique said, and I'm gonna misquote it, but he was like, our people have never been associated with poverty, right? So, I think that's only one small view of how to look at the difference in dating a white male or female. That being said, often, and then like I said, based on, we live in America, and the truth about America is that there is a white privilege that goes on. And the truth about that is that there's a lot of white people who aren't aware of that. Who just, I don't know what they think, but they're just not aware of it.
Right.
I had an experience with this older white dude that I know, and we were talking about this article where this black businessman who was a boss, and he was talking to one of his employees, and used the N-word like 8 times as he was talking to his other. She was a female, and he was like, "Well, that's terrible, and she should be paid all this money and for her, and she should own the company. I mean, what the hell? What do you think?" And I was like, "Well, what if he had used another word except for the N-word, and he would have said that you are illiterate and will amount to nothing, and you can't read, and you're a lowlife."
Right.
And he was like, "Well, maybe not all those words, because that's kind of hurtful." And I was like, "But," so he summed it up, and he used one word to say the same thing. I go, so, it's at that point, you kind of got to look at it in a different perspective and light. But as far as moving up and bettering yourself, I would just say that sometimes you may be privileged to other doors that you might not have previously had access to. Kind of like the father did with the school and the mayor, right? Could he have gotten that with the NAACP or any kind of groups like that? Maybe not. He ran with the mayor. The mayor hooked him up with the spot. Cool.
Right. I think anytime you do something like that, you leave, say, your community to try to reach a higher level. If you're not in the mind state of like, okay, well, what I gain by leaving, I'm gonna go back and help.
The spook who sat by the door.
Right. Then if you don't have that mind state, then in essence, it's a waste because you're leaving and you're really selfish. You're thinking about yourself.
But that's the American way, though.
That is American way. But like for example, these athletes, right? And if you really do the knowledge of generally athletes who come from very harsh communities, they say basketball or football is what got me out. Like leaving is, you know what I mean? Like that.
You've achieved some type of success,
right? But it's like out means where I was at was terrible, and the wrong place to be. Or instead of looking at it, basketball gave me the tools I needed to first and foremost be a better person, but now show these youth in the community that I came from that they can be better too.
Right.
It's isolating yourself. I got out, you know what I mean? And then these black athletes or black male athletes tend to get out and get with a Caucasian woman. So it's like you're leaving completely that old way of life behind you, to try to be other than your own self, really.
And I'd always heard that, the white woman, in some respects, represented a trophy for black men. That when you achieve some surmountable success in your life, the white woman came with it. And here's an interesting thing that I think would deserve some follow-up, maybe talking to some other people who are really interested. And this is another thing, let me just point this out, that, when we attempt to approach what's known as interracial couples, black men, white women, vice versa, many of them are unwilling to actually have a conversation about what we're talking about today. They just leave it as, well, love is colorblind, because we love each other. But when we get into some of these other issues, for example, we know that on average, black men, and according to what the census refers to our brown seed brothers as Hispanics, we make far less money than white males and now Asians, right? So for white women who are dating black men or they are companions with black men, are they satisfied with that reality that most of the black men that you're going to meet are making far less than your white male counterpart?
Right.
And if none of that's taken into consideration in your relationship, that's all fine and dandy. But
I'd say you're not being honest and real with yourself, though. Right? I mean, we live in a country where money matters.
Right. True indeed. There is something that I wanted to also share, which was in an article. It was talking about, some of the differences in terms of how interracial relationships see finance. And it said that finance and how we deal with finance is more or less based on our cultural attitudes. Like, so in other words, if our family taught us growing up to save money, regardless of whether or not we enter into a relationship with someone white, we're still going to carry that into the relationship with the idea that, no, we have to save money, regardless of how much you have. Whereas if you're coming from what would be considered a more wealthier background, and you come into a situation with, a white counterpart, their idea of saving may be somewhat foreign to you. So what they were saying is that race didn't really dictate, how people save or spend money.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that for sure. And I think we talked about that on the show where the more money you made, the smaller amount of children you were likely to have, and the less money you made, the more children you were likely to have. And I was having a conversation with one of the dudes I trained martial arts with. He's a Caucasian man, and his whole thing was he was like, man, when I have kids, he's like, I've been thinking about it, but when I have kids, I want to make sure that I can financially kind of support them. And so that's kind of how he was thinking about it. And then, when you look at some of our people necessarily who aren't maybe middle class, whatever that means.
Is that lower middle class or upper middle class or middle class?
Right, exactly. They're not necessarily thinking about it like that, right? Mm-hmm. They're just like, oh, well, have a baby. Mm-hmm. Or, I had a baby, and okay, cool. Now that's what I do, and I'll deal with it now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whereas, Caucasians, I think that's kind of built into their thinking and the mind frame where they're like, okay, if we're gonna have a kid, we'll have one. We'll make sure we're at a good place. Kind of discipline ourselves. So like you were saying, where race doesn't necessarily dictate saving. I would say it does kind of have something to do with having kids and how that whole interaction goes, and that's going to also dictate how many kids you have.
Right. And there's some information out there that also says that there is an increasing number of suicides among people that would be classified as wealthy.
Wow.
And I think what you said is very important because I know I grew up understanding that in white families, you were pushed to make sure you were at the top of your game before you even thought about starting a family.
Right.
And sometimes, that leads to old parents and uncontrollable teenagers.
Right.
Because your daddy is 60 years old and you're 18 and wow, what I mean? So, our thing is just, marriage, reproduction and things of that nature is just part of the science of life. You know what I mean? It's important for the continuity of the planet. That's just how I see it.
And above finances, I think it's about teaching that child everything that you come to learn in your existence, so that they have a step above you. Maybe a step above that, then a step further in what you might have had growing up.
Right.
So then they can reach a certain level on their own without having to say, okay, well, I got this money from my pops and mom. I got this, I got that. But no, I earned it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now I learn more to add on. So when I have children, they'll be even further. Because that's, if you think about it, that's how we got to the point of greatness that we did in our history. It was through passing down certain knowledge.
Right.
Continue to build and build and build.
Right, no doubt. Yeah. So then, would you say that it would... Here's a twist. Would it be okay or beneficial to enter in an interracial relationship with a Caucasian if that could build and add on to something that you were trying to achieve?
I guess you'd have to determine specifically what that goal would be. Is it something that you see as more of short term, or are you looking for generational? Like, okay, what I gain from this instance or this marriage or this union is not only going to help me, but it's going to help my children, their children, so on and so forth.
Right.
And I don't think money is the answer to that, because as soon as you lose money, if you don't have any tools or knowledge and wisdom, you're going to commit suicide.
Right. And on that note, why don't we go ahead and take a quick break?
Yes, sir.
And we'll be right back at you. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray.
Peace. Jaquil Najee.
Peace to rule of law.
And before we left, we were talking about some of the impediments and the benefits of what's known as interracial relationships. And the consensus is that, for the most part, in our society, it appears that most people believe that they can get ahead by marrying someone who is Caucasian. Whereas at the same time, many of us don't realize that we're losing a sense of our identity, if not that, giving it away. So why don't we pick it up? I know people are asking this question: when are you going to talk about the children? Because we kind of brushed on it earlier in the show. But I do want to bring up, do children from interracial relationships have a more difficult childhood? So again, if you're just now tuning in, we define interracial relationship as those that were between an original person, black, brown, yellow, and a Caucasian, not between original people. So, do the children generally have a more difficult childhood, knowing the fact that one of their parents is Caucasian and the other parent is black?
I would say, yeah, you're generally going to have to experience a little bit more, and from both sides, unfortunately, right? You're going to have, your black people are going to look at you a certain kind of way. I mean, I'm just being real, right? That's what's going to happen. And not all of them, but you're going to have some. And then, just society as a whole is definitely slanted to kind of look at black a certain way, right? So you have to deal with that whole issue. And then you try to identify with which side, I guess you're going to go with.
Right.
And your place in society, that's going to be a tough one for you to have to try to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. I think it's definitely a difficult task because, it's like it's a very sensitive situation. So, for example, you have a parent who may be, say, a black man and a white woman, right? They're probably not going to go too heavily into the history of the relations between black and white people. So that child is not going to get any kind of foundation, and then they're going to go to school, and they're going to hear about Columbus. They're going to hear about slavery. They're going to hear about this and that. They're going to hear about how there has been a disconnect and a divide between black and brown people throughout history, and they're going to be like, okay, well, what side do I identify with? What It's just going to cause confusion.
Right. And let me throw this question out: how do you think that child then looks at the parent who is black? Right? Does that give them a skewed perspective and kind of erodes that parent's position of power?
Right. I mean, that's an interesting thing, because I think one of the things that we have to consider is parenting. Of course, you give credit where credit is due. However, you can see that in some circles, in some families, uh, Caucasian women have a really tough time with the males in their family. Okay, if the father is black, especially if the father is not around. Part of that is because sometimes when the male chooses one day that they're going to gravitate towards who they truly are, which is black in the first place, that then they begin seeing their mother as a stranger. So how that relates to their whole existence as men, there still is a sense of disconnect if they haven't fully been taught their history in a manner to where they would be trained or qualified enough to teach their mother who they are and who their mother is, and quite frankly accept that. But we're talking about a rare person that's actually going to be honest with themselves, honest with their child. Because, again, and I'm not picking on the brother, but, many years ago when Tiger Woods was asked, something about his heritage, I can't remember the question, but he said, I'm Caliber Asian. And his father, yes, I mean that was the whole, I'm caliber Asian because his mother, if I'm not mistaken, she's from Thailand,
Okay.
and his father was of African descent. So his father taught him everything that he knew about golf, and his mother nurtured him as a child. So why didn't he just say he was black? Because if you look at both of his parents, they have dark skin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're gonna say I'm caliber Asian, and then you look at his habits. I'll just you look at his habits now. You kind of have to ask yourself, well, what sense of identity? Even though he's one of the greatest golfers of all time, what sense of identity did he walk away from in his household? What was his sense of identity? What was taught or not taught? Who knows?
And I think it's really something that's it's affected him in this day and time because after because he was the darling of really white media and white sports for a long time.
Right,
It was Tiger this, Tiger that.
Tiger Woods was to the media what the middle class is to the poor, right? He's like good buffer,
Right?
Yeah.
And you can put that out there and be like, no, look, we have good people who are successful.
Right.
We have a nice black guy.
Right. But then he cheated on the white woman,
That's really messed up.
and then he's never been the same since.
How dare he?
But in actuality, I also think that the fact that again, we're talking about escapism, as was mentioned earlier, the fact that he did not want to embrace the fact that he was a black athlete.
Right.
Because he was, like I said, he was in a state
right
where it benefited him to just be whatever you just said, caliber Asian. Because when you make a statement like that, you're really being comical.
Right.
And then white people look at you like, oh, look at that funny guy.
Right.
If he was like, I'm black with a straight face.
On the square, like.
Right. It would have been a different situation. So,
right.
He recognized that in the state that he was in, it would have benefited him to be other than black.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now he needs to come home. Come home, Tiger.
True indeed. There's one thing I wanted to share, which was it's an article you can find on the Grio, that's spelled GRIO.com, and it's titled "Raising Biracial Kids in 2013: The Challenges and the Opportunities for the African American Community." It's written by Susan Russ. And one of the comments, they quoted someone by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Gardere, who was kind of talking about some of the challenges that biracial children face, so to speak. And I just want to kind of read this. It says that, and Dr. Gardere is a professor of behavioral medicine. And he said that, quote, for family members who make cutting comments or even make stupid comments such as, this child has good hair or pretty skin, we should gently correct them with the proper terminology. But whatever we do, we should not make a big deal of the situation. What's everybody's take on that?
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's those little subtleties, they add up, because people still consider, in a scene where certain original women don't feel comfortable just wearing their hair curly. They have to iron it down and do all types of things to it to make it look a certain way.
Taking back to the old show, guy, do you remember exactly how many you said, how much money black women spent on hair care products?
A couple billion or something ridiculous to that degree. Yeah, it's crazy. But I think that's the issue is because things become subconscious. As a child, you're learning, always learning. So anything that your parents say, parents do, grandparents, anyone who has influence says or does is going to influence that child. And it's going to be a part of their subconscious mind. And later in life, it's going to dictate how they carry themselves, how they see themselves, and those types of things. I think the biggest thing for me with interracial, the term interracial or biracial, is confusing. So any child who considers himself interracial or biracial is going to be confused.
Or mixed.
Or mixed, right? Because mulatto, all those terms, right? It's dealing with. There's no science in it because think about it. How do you determine if someone is biracial or interracial? Because through history, there's been times where, say, Asian people had children with black people.
Mhm.
What makes right, and then they make a different people, and then would that people be considered biracial?
Hmm.
You know,
Mixed.
like mixed. Okay. No, but I'm just saying, like, there's really no clear cut scientific definition across the board for these terms. So to me, it's like it's more destructive than it is something that builds a sense of prestige or connecting to reality. You know.
And I think in terms of just going into the science of what you said, you know, those sciences which created a racial caste system were, you know, they were created by Caucasians who were trying to keep everybody separate, who were actually one group of people.
Right.
So when we say something like, I'm Creole, okay, so you're Creole. What does that mean? Well, that means that one of my parents is black, but the other one, or I have some French heritage in me.
Right.
But you won't just say that you're a black person,
Right.
black man or woman that speaks French.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the funny thing about people who like to always say, I'm Creole, I'm Creole, I'm Creole. You want to keep the French in your family. The Haitians, they also speak French, and they handed France's ass to them. And they actually wound up being the ones who defined guerrilla warfare. So you can't identify with the Haitians, the dark Haitians, who ran France out of their small island and gained their own independence. But you can identify with the person who they have really light skin and light eyes. You know how some of you women say, you know, he's cute, girl. He has some pretty hair and he got those light eyes. You know, they kind of green. I'm not sure. Okay, listen, your sense of beauty is somewhat distorted.
Yeah.
Not to say that people who are classified, you know, within that description that I just said, but I'm just saying that the fact that you're putting that above the darker of us, you know, it shows a sense of your loss of identity.
Distorted. It's distorted because, like we built on that show, for example, light eyes, lighter skin to some degree, are actually not beneficial as it relates to, you know, interacting with the sun, nature, those types of things. So, if you think about in the animal kingdom, right? Animal, like a female animal will choose a mate based on its genetic, you know, foundation. So they'll look and they'll sense, okay, well they'll be a good male to procreate with, based on the genetic benefits that they do carry.
Exactly.
But with us, it's turned around. You know, blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin are things that are considered of prestige, but those are all genetically recessive traits. You know what I mean? So everything,
scientifically proven.
right. So,
Wow. So let's go ahead and move it forward in terms of wow. I mean, let's go into the identity crisis that ensues when dating Caucasians. So how does a black man lose their sense of identity when they date a Caucasian woman? Because again, we talked about what we give up and what we gain, and in essence, what happens to our sense of blackness. So I just kind of wanted to pass that around. I mean, does a black man at some point end up taking sides when they're confronted by racism? So really good scenario would be a situation that may have taken place in the media, such as Trayvon Martin, for example. You know, how many couples really began seeing the injustice in regard to that case, or did they just kind of lean the other way and say, well, it was because he was wearing a hood? You know what I mean? Like these black kids these days, they need to really watch how they dress. So he was wearing a hood. I probably would have shot him too.
Or do they say, poor kid, it's unfortunate that happened.
Right.
You know, I wish he gets justice. And kind of just trying to sweep it under the rug and keep it moving. Yeah, no, I think those are great points. Who's the brother who was on Donahue, who was going hard on white people? He was from the NOI.
Oh,
He used to be.
yeah, bald head brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Khalil Muhammad. Yeah. So you can't necessarily be that dude and, and be with a white girl,
Right.
woman,
Right.
right? Because that's just not going to work
Right.
that way. Whereas you're talking truth about what happened historically, um, and you know, not that I agree with everything that brother says, but whereas you know you're going to say, okay, well, here this happened, and this was caused by these people, and you can clearly see that. You can't necessarily take that because then it's at that point you're almost attacking that other person.
Yeah. It's like we built about on the tiny chat where if you have a obese girlfriend,
right,
you're gonna be conscious of certain comments you make in regards to fat people or obese people.
Right. Or even about skinny women.
Right.
You're not gonna really pay attention to skinny.
Exactly.
Like, oh, she's too skinny.
Right.
Right. And try to compensate for her. Yeah,
right.
For sure.
You know, that's natural situation then.
Right. So it's like a conflict of interest.
Right.
Really.
Right. So one can only wonder if someone like let's use any great leader. If Che Guevara, for example, had a Caucasian wife, would his effort to liberate Cuba and then also attempt to liberate his own country in South America, would it have been stunted in some way?
I would definitely say yes, unless she was a special woman and realized the injustice that goes on, and basically she just saw the truth for what it was. If she could really look at the truth and be honest with herself and what role her people play in it and what's actually going on, then yeah. Now the reality is most Caucasian men or women aren't willing to do that.
Right. I think there's a sense of nervousness, but also it begins to be a thing to where it's just like, hey, it's not our problem. You know what I mean?
Well, they say I'm not like that.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, you're not, but your people are, and your people are still continuing to do this to my people.
Right. And
get your Moses on, man.
And you benefit. Get your Moses on, right? And you benefit. And that's another thing for someone that makes a statement like that. Whereas I'm not like that. The thing is, brother, you benefit from it.
Right.
Whether it's you or not, you benefit from those white privileges. Okay. Another question that we have posed. Can Caucasians understand and empathize with the black experience? So I wanted to let this flow a little bit. What is the black experience? Because we all have had different experiences in life. So what is the black experience?
Oh man, it's about people always opening the doors to you and not rolling up the windows. Walking into malls and stores and not being profiled and offered the best selection of everything.
Right, then you hold their purse real quick, tie their shoe, those beautiful things, No, I think the black experience is a great experience. I wouldn't change anything.
For sure.
But I think it's an experience that's definitely eye-opening. Even before I had the knowledge of myself, there was things that I would notice and how people would get uncomfortable when I was, in their presence. When I played football, I was a lot bigger. And, to be a big, muscular black man is kind of like, okay. Right. So they always had that eye on you, You come into the store, they have an eye on you. You're walking down the street. See an old white woman walking towards you. You could already see her kind of hesitating,
a little bit,
clutching the purse,
trying to cross the street.
Yeah, right. So, to me it was always funny because it's like, wow, you're really that ignorant to take me on face value.
Right.
I was never really bothered by it, which I think that's a good trait to have, not to be bothered by it, but I just thought it was funny, So yeah, I mean, that would be, a piece of it. Obviously you have certain powers that be that are really trying to get you to live at your lowest state of existence.
Hmm.
So there's always that constant force that makes certain things that are unnatural to who and what you are seem appealing. You know, whether that's you know, you know, hustling or you know, disrespecting your women or across the board, all these types of different things. So it's just really, to me, it's a great experience. That's a black experience to me. The greatest experience.
Yeah, I would say the black experience is definitely one of battle, right, and conflict. Um, and I would agree that it's definitely the best experience because if you know that you can uh, make it as a black man and be successful, at that point there's nothing that can stop you because anything that tried to stop you has already failed because you've already made it to success. So now, yeah, and that's kind of what I try to teach my son. It's like, yeah, you may be, you know what I'm saying, where everyone else is starting the race off at the starting line, you may be starting 5 to 10 feet back. Right? But, so that means you have to train harder than everyone else. Right? So you got to be able to cover 25 feet quicker than they can cover 20 feet. So that you can get ahead or even with people and then push to get harder and get farther ahead of people. I go, but doing that is going to allow you to be in better situations and put yourself ahead of other people because you're going to have a different kind of work ethic that no one else is going to have because you have to work harder to get certain things that you want.
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, as far as the black experience, as far as I've lived this life, I find myself, before I came into the knowledge of myself, I was constantly trying to solve problems within myself. So you have a major conflict when you don't know yourself as a black man. You don't know which direction you're trying to go in, whether legal or illegally, because that's always constantly been broadcasted to us since we've been here in the wilderness of North America.
Sure.
So then what you find before you come to knowledge of yourself, the black experience is basically trying to solve your inner conflict. Once you come into the knowledge of yourself, though, you find yourself just about everywhere you go and you're there for a period of time, you always feel this situation where you're trying to solve a problem where you are. So in your workplace, you see that there is an absence of compassion. So you may take it upon yourself to try to make sure people understand love and compassion for each other.
Right.
And what do you usually come up against? You usually come up against people who don't necessarily feel that way. So I think the black experience is really just, it encompasses, the importance of being truthful and real men. You know what I mean? Like we're trying to teach people how to be the greatest beings. You know what I mean? Not just on some low level, I'm present, surviving, I'm just barely making it. Or I only work with this person, but really trying to create a better world. And then also the experience is that you become very familiar with law enforcement and the police. And you become very familiar with consequences. You know what I mean? Being blamed for things that you may not necessarily be, that you're not responsible for, may not be, but that you're not responsible for. You're always considered a suspect. You know what I mean?
Guilty to proven innocent.
Right. You couldn't possibly be the owner of this credit card. How is that possible? I'm going to scan this $100 bill, and the only reason why I'm not calling the Federal Reserve to find out about this $100 bill is because I got a line right here. You know what I mean? But it's like really small things of prejudice, but then there's some really big things as well. So how about we go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come back at you in a couple of minutes. Peace.
Peace.
Peace and welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Interracial.
Peace, Jaffa.
Peace, Drew.
And before we left, we were talking about a lot of the intricacies related to the fact that once you step into an interracial relationship, you also delve into not only deeply rooted prejudice, but conflict with identity. And more importantly, you begin to question not only your blackness, but you begin to question quite a few other things as it relates to you as a black man or a black woman. And we also hit you with our idea of what the black experience is. I think to follow up, one of the things that we wanted to share was this idea of what happens when you're in a relationship with, say, a white man or a white woman, depends on your gender. There's this idea of alienation that comes from that type of union, not only just within the family structure, but also within social relationships. So one of the things that I've experienced just, frequenting areas where, white people may be having a social gathering is when you arrive to a social gathering and you happen to be one of 3 black people that are at that party, for some strange reason, you're always made aware that you're different.
Yeah.
From the time you walk in, it's not just like, hey, what's up? It's nothing like that. It's just the general, when you walk in, the look that you're given by the people at the party.
Right.
And maybe in some cases, it wasn't done intentionally, but a lot of what we project as individuals, we learn that from people in our families. So things such as that, it leads to some form of alienation, which means that you begin to feel like an outsider. To help you understand this, and I'm going to give it to Jakil to add on, imagine what it's like to be one out of 50 people at your workplace that happens to be black, or that happens to be of Mexican descent, so forth and so on. Some of you out there will say, well, it doesn't really make me any difference whatsoever. However, those of us that have knowledge of self, we begin to ask ourselves, how come I'm one of 3 black people in a class of people who are trying to pursue teaching credential? Why is that? That's when you really begin feeling this sense of alienation. And when I experienced that, would have having a white woman in my life change that alienation? Absolutely not. And that's
right.
the whole
They
point.
wouldn't have looked at you and be like, well, you know what? His woman is white. Let's give that guy a shot.
Right.
Exactly. So I wanted to pass it over to Jakil and give him that time to build in terms of what is alienation in social relationships, in terms of like why do we become alienated, especially when we date someone who's considered white, Caucasian, and how does that affect our social relationships, and like what other areas of our society do we experience this alienation?
I think you really hit on it. I think some of it, alienation, comes from our own people, right? So you show up at the spot with all your homies, and you show up with your white girl. Everyone's gonna be like, oh, all the whispers behind your back is, oh man, this dude showed up with this white girl, and it's like he think he better than everyone here, right? And you like, well, nah, this is maybe the person I, for whatever reason, I'm in love with this person, and this is the person I decided to be with, and so you kind of get that alienation.
That's an interesting perspective right there. I never thought about that. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that goes back, and you see it in, I don't know how many of you watch anime movies, but all the heroes are blonde hair and blue eyes.
Right.
And you're like, damn, how many blonde hair, blue eyed people live in Japan?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
There you go.
Right? And so it seems like, I know we kind of touched on this earlier, but it seems like that structure, that look, is what's powerful and dominant, and what's as you achieving the thing, right? That's like at Indiana Jones when they're trying to get the cup, right? It's like everyone's trying to get the white girl, and that's what's been perceived as the thing to get. And so I think you get some kind of alienation, the same way you would if you showed up to the same spot and all your boys are driving Toyotas and Hondas, and you just won the lottery. You show up with your ultra nice BMW or Mercedes. People are gonna be like, "Oh man, look at this cat. He showed up in a BMW now. Or you too good for your Honda that you have or something? You got to floss in the BMW." And so I would say that's one form of alienation that you get. But then on the other hand, as far as social relationships, I think she's gonna know a group of people that you probably wouldn't have had an introduction into, and that's one way I guess where a benefit of being in that interracial relationship is because now you're gonna get to meet the other side of people who you may not have previously been able to intermingle with. Hopefully, make some good business deals out of it, and move forward in that kind of life.
You know what I would encourage people, those of you who you have several white friends or maybe you have a white companion, engage in an honest conversation. And really what I'm looking for white people to ask, to be honest with you, of black and white women is, what is it like to be black in America? Right. And then they give you the opportunity to dialogue about that, what you experience, but more importantly, what they can do to make this a better place to live. And I don't think those conversations take place too often. Sometimes I listen to conversations, because I got big ears. I listen to conversations between original people and Caucasians, and many of them are very shallow. You know what I mean? It's just, how was your weekend? What did you eat there? What did you drink?
Not building.
No, it's not building. And it's not anything that I think is actually changing anything. You know what I mean? Even and I'm an educator. I'm going to tell you right now that there are quite a few teachers out there who they claim that they are educated. However, they're not really studying how to do anything outside of teaching a book really well. And that's a real issue to me.
I would say that goes on kind of to our next question, as far as the preconceived thoughts that people have when they enter relationships. And like you said, whether it's a student-teacher or man and wife or man and woman, or a business relationship, it almost seems that when you look at a black man, I know sometimes I do it too. For instance, like if I see a group of black people hanging out on the corner, for a moment I'm gonna have that look in my head like, oh man. What's up with these dudes in the corner like that?
Right.
But most times than not, when you walk up and everyone's cool and chilling, but it's kind of been taught socially to have that kind of, well, you see black people in the corner, then there must be gangs doing something bad. Right. You should be afraid.
And we do it to ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Me as a black man, sometimes, and I have to check myself, like, yo, why did I just? Where the hell did that thought come from?
And we also think that in terms of when we see Caucasians in certain areas. When I see Caucasians in Watts, I say to myself,
that dude's got to be doing something.
What are people doing?
Right.
You're either feds or you're coming to get drugs.
Right.
Which means you're feds.
So, Trinity, so what are the preconceived thoughts of our people when we enter relationships with someone other than an original person? Generally, what do white women? Let's begin with white women. I think that would be an interesting thing. I'm not a white woman.
Oh, you said what a white woman's
what types of ideas does she have about black men when she enters into a relationship, just based on our experiences?
Go ahead, go there.
Anyone want to begin that?
Hey, this is our show, Black. You can go there.
I would have to say, the black man basically is superior in the bedroom.
That's a very nice way to say.
Yeah, I'll say it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing and couldn't quite figure out how to formulate the sentence in a nice way. Right. But yeah, I would think, and that's why I was getting to the analogy earlier with like the Ferrari, right? That's the superior machine, and who doesn't want to have the Ferrari?
Right. Right. And I think it's more from they think of the man as more of an object, like he's going to make me feel like no one's ever made me feel before, as opposed to I can really get with this person and build a family with, and they're gonna provide me with the safety, the things that I need
Right.
as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's more based on, um, you know, some would say passion. It's more based on that as a foundation. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think taking it to like a social arena, from my experience, it's always white women or white men. They tend to perceive black men as people who are eventually going to fall short. We're people who are not going to live up to what we're supposed to be doing in their midst. When, from my experience, you actually know more about their job than they do. But
Right.
you're always suspect. You're always suspected as being the one who doesn't know enough or who's incapable of doing or rising to their fullest potential. You know, I think that's a preconceived notion that's very common.
What did Talib say? Being the black man is demanding.
Mm. It definitely is. God is one of the most demanding things that I don't know if few people actually experience. That is, if you're out there being a real man. You know what I mean? If you're out there just kind of hand and fisting your life away. If you understand that.
Right.
I mean, you can tell me all you want. I make, $3,000 a day. I don't have to answer anybody. But I'm talking about for those of us who decide to follow that straight and narrow to the best of our ability, man. It's hard in some respects. So
I think
how about how we act?
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, no, you hit it on the nail with as far as in the social arena and, them kind of expecting you to always fall short. And so I think a lot of that has to do with the preconceived notion on how they think that black people are. Right? We're always loud, hopping around, singing,
Mm-hmm.
and so, like for instance, I had a white woman tell me, "Wow, you speak so well and you're so articulate and eloquent."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Well, shouldn't everyone who paid attention in English class?" What are you asking? Do you want to see my grade point average? I mean,
right.
So, go ahead.
No, I mean it's one of those things where like a more blunt way that people might say that same thing is like, "Wow, you don't talk black." Then you ask someone, "Well, what does talking black sound like?" Or what is black? No one ever has an answer.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, I never get an answer because I do have that. I've had that conversation. Huh?
Yeah.
You don't talk black, and I'm like, well, so what does that mean to talk black?
Right.
And they're like, well, I'm like, no, I don't. That's why I'm asking you this question.
Right.
Because since I'm black, I want to talk like I'm supposed to talk.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? And no
Right.
one can ever tell you. And you know what they want to say? They want to say, well, your pants are at your waistline.
Right.
They should be sagging.
Right.
And your clothes should be bigger than they're supposed to be. And you should be using incorrect grammar in English for everything that you say.
Right.
And having a lot of MFs and B words and hoes in your sentences.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that you brought up language because I remember watching this brief, not necessarily an interview, but poet Saul Williams was speaking about how he was raised. Both black parents, and he said that language is a very important thing in his household. If he strayed away and started speaking improperly, they would stop and say, "No, you're supposed to say this.
Right.
You need to learn how to enunciate your words."
Right.
For me, it's a matter of all of us here and all of you there. You can code switch. You know what I mean? We speak two languages. Like students ask me, "So which languages do you speak?" I say, "I speak English and slang." You know what I mean? So we do have to learn these words.
Right.
I said, because if someone says, "I'm gonna pull a burner out on you," and you don't know what a burner is, you're in trouble.
Right.
You're like, "Oh great, let me go get my marshmallows and chocolate."
Exactly.
We'll have a great time.
Yeah, yeah. And we're all hip hop aficionados, so we listen to hip hop to keep up on the current language, not only with the youth, but we try to renew our history in terms of language. You know what I mean? You gotta know what's going on in the world today on all levels, right? Allah is the Lord of all worlds. So, in saying that, one of the things that consciously I think we all said really bothers us is that there's a lot of emulation of our people going on in terms of white women and black men. And when they emulate us, they always emulate the worst or the poor part of our people. So the white male who's into hip hop, he feels like it's necessary for him to be the most ignorant person in a group of black friends. You know, so he's trying to out,
I'll black you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know. There's probably a term out there, man. So we'll use "I'll black you." As far as the young ladies out there who feel like you suddenly have to speak in this black vernacular to better relate to the black man that you're dating, you don't have to do that. You know what I mean? Because if it's not natural, to me, it's disgusting. You know what I mean? You're being something other than yourself.
Right.
How was you seeing it?
No, I mean that's real, and it made me think because there was a time, prior to the knowledge of myself, that I did date Caucasian women, I would always think, I thought back and I was thinking like, I don't think I ever dated a Caucasian woman who acted black, right, or acted a certain way that was other than her own self. And it's probably for a reason, though. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have wanted to be with someone who was trying to be something that they really weren't.
Right.
Right. But yeah, I thought this might be a little bit off topic, but I was thinking about how, and we didn't really get to how the family sees a black male or black female being brought home. It's too much in depth, but I was looking at that. And I realized that for me, being that I was really heavily involved in sports and that, I was pretty good, I think I got kind of a pass. I mean, I did, face some prejudice and things of that nature or some apprehension and stuff, but I don't think it was to the degree that, other individuals who might not necessarily have had, I guess that kind of a foundation, would have seen. So, it just makes me think. I guess I'll ask the question: do you think there's a difference in the way an individual is treated based on what their foundation may be? Say, if they are a black millionaire being brought home,
definitely,
are they treated different than your brother that's coming off the block? With his pants hanging down. So would you say it's more of a racial difference, or is it so? Would the bottom line just be?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if it was, if you were to take out both of those situations and put a white dude in there, a white millionaire, and a white dude with his pants hanging down, would he still get the same response as if it was a black dude?
I think that money in this world has made to be power. And whichever face money comes in for some people, right, doesn't really matter what that person looks like. I mean, I don't really like to put rappers' names out there, so I'm gonna stop doing it because, quite frankly, I don't really like a lot of the rappers. I just don't like y'all. I think y'all are punks, but punks with a whole bunch of money. But the point is that when you hear about these different individuals who have all this money, if they're entertainers or athletes, they're flowing in all these different circles, right? But at the same time, they can be themselves because they have money to speak for them, and people that encounter them, they want them. In more of like an everyday sort of situation, I mean, if you're a black man and you go over to your girlfriend's house who happens to be white, and you walk over there for the first time with your pants hanging down, but yet maybe you're an attorney, you would be judged based on your appearance first.
True.
But then once they realize where you were in this society, they'll say, we'll just look past that because he's an attorney.
That's just how he is.
Right. Right. If a Caucasian male went over to a black household, that would be an issue. I mean, in most cases, like, what's wrong with him? You know what I mean? He's a lawyer. Well, again, what's wrong with him?
Right.
Why is he coming over here like that? We're not like that.
Right.
So there's a sense. I think there's more of a sense of dignity in black households for the most part, in
When,
terms of how you approach.
yeah, when things are all, when things are balanced in that household, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
True indeed. I think before we close up, I did want to share something from a chapter. It's called "The Fact of Blackness," and it's called "Black Skin, White Mask" by Franz Fanon. And one of the things I'm just going to share this with you. This was, from what I understand, it was an autobiography that Franz Fanon wrote. He's also the author of "Wretched of the Earth," but he was writing about like the psychological effect of 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 being black in a white-dominated world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And we're going to experience this to the day we return to the essence, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But it says here, at least in my copy, it's page 109. He says that I came into the world imbued with the will to find a meaning in things, my spirit filled with the desire to attain to the source of the world. And then I found that I was an object in the midst of other objects. Sealed into that crushing objecthood, I turned beseechingly to others. Their attention was a liberation, running over my body, suddenly abraded into non-being, endowing me once more with an agility that I had thought lost, and by taking me out of the world, restoring me to it. But just as I reached the other side, I stumbled, and the movements, the attitudes, the glances of the other fixed me there, in the sense in which a chemical solution is fixed by a dye. I was indignant. I demanded an explanation. Nothing happened. I burst apart. Now the fragments have been put together again by another self. As long as the black man is among his own, he will have no occasion, except in minor internal conflicts, to experience his being through others. Why don't we go ahead and do the do, read, and view? I mean, y'all can make a comment on that because
I mean, it's pretty much that's high power. I'll leave that one.
So for the read, we have the autobiography of Malcolm X and Black Skin, White Mask.
Definitely pay attention to the chapter in that book, the autobiography of Malcolm X, called Mascot. That's what really changed my life.
Okay.
Reason being is because, basically he saw himself as a mascot when he was amongst Caucasian people, when he was in their schools and things of that nature. At first, on face value, he thought he was being accepted because he was, different. They're like, wow, he's the cool black kid, this, that, and the third, he's smart. But it as he reflected on it later, he realized that he was almost like the pet, He's the cute.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So for me, that made me really look back and reflect on my existence. And then that's really the precursor to me wanting to get knowledge of self. So this was years ago. So definitely do the knowledge for that.
What was it as far as the do?
Oh, the view. The view is View Jungle Fever. If you haven't seen it, Spike Lee joint. And the do is, teach biracial children, that they are black or original, based specifically on science. You need to give them some sort of scientific foundation so that they can really see themselves in their true light. So there's no confusion there, and then the world doesn't teach them that there's something else. So.
True indeed. I really like that last point. Did you have something you wanted to add, brother?
That's good.
Yeah, I want to thank, to begin with, the guy Life Allah, my brother Jakil, Knowledge Allah, and Jarul Allah for, bringing this show together and bringing us all together to build on these things. And more importantly, we would like to thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing from you on our various sources of social media. Can we give that to the people, because I didn't really give them the Twitter.
Okay.
So I mean, the guy got it memorized. I want to make sure you put that.
All right. So the Twitter is at KOS Radio 123. The Facebook. I'll let Jakil tell the group on the Facebook.
Oh, the group on the Facebook. That is Knowledge of Self Radio. It's where you can find.
Oh, that's it. Okay. And then we have the we have the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/KOS.radio show.
Put it up for YouTube. So.
Yeah, definitely subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/KOS, the number 9 radio. And if you just go to our website, which is knowledgeofradio.weebly.com, up on the right-hand corner, you can click, and it has all of the different things as it relates to what we just built on right there for you to click on. So it'll take you to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. So, yeah.
That's the easy way.
Right.
True indeed. Well, I'd like to thank my brothers and you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next Sunday from 2 to 4. Peace.
Peace.